Hello, beautiful beings, love and laughter. Tanya Rainbow Horse here. This video is for energy sensitives and empaths especially. We're going to talk about boundaries. These beautiful, invisible cutoff points. It's really kind of energy of them. They're especially important for empaths and energy sensitive because we are more prone to just letting ourselves get squeezed and sucked into nothing. And so when we learn how to say enough is enough, we start to stack our energy in a different way. And it's not just towards people that we have these boundaries. It's for ourselves too. Like if you're a person who is unbalanced in certain areas of your life, and you don't cap something and you know that you're overdoing it, that is detrimental to you as well. So it's not just people boundaries, it's boundaries in general, boundaries with yourself, knowing when you've hit a limit on something. Now, there's no magical answer. It's what is right for you. It's like this, you got to feel into it. Like, oh, that experience with so-and-so was too much. Now I know that I need to back it up a little bit and cut it off before it gets to that point. Oftentimes we will get to a point of resenting other people and blaming them energetically for pushing our boundaries when we don't even realize that we're allowing it and we're the ones in control of it, and we can actually cut that off. I had to do a huge energy purge on a couple different people because I didn't realize I was not putting boundaries down with them, and I was getting resentful towards them, and I had a lot of anger towards them, and I was like, well, what is this about? Well, it's because they pushed my boundaries continuously and I would just cringe and I didn't really understand what was going on. But I was just draining myself, and then I didn't want to deal with them or be around them. And it was like, well, why? It's like, oh, because when I've had enough, I don't cut it off. I don't say I'm done. I don't say no. I was waffling in inconsistent, like somebody would do something and I would know that would be a no, and I couldn't quite stand in that authority of putting that boundary down. And so I would kind of say no, and then I'd kind of let him push it, and then yes, and then it kind of waffled, and then they plowed right over it. So beautiful energetic cutoff points. Can make or break you. They are important for giving us our self-respect. Again, not just with people, but with ourselves. If we run over our own boundaries, we lose self-respect for ourselves and we feel less worthy. So that's why it's important to pay attention when you're overdoing it in areas, being aware of where you overdo it so you can keep an eye on yourself and be honest with yourself, because intuitively you always know, even if you want to deny it. It's like if you got a situation with eating, if you know there's a certain type of food that you just can't resist, learning how to put a boundary up with that somehow, some way, throw it away, whatever. If you haven't quite mastered how to, cut off your spending at a certain time before, you go over a certain limit and overspend yourself, you've got to learn a boundary to set. We're like, well, if I'm going to go out and shop, I got this amount, and after that, I'm done, and you got to stick to that. So you can build rapport with yourself and build up that self-respect that you are taking care of your own needs and not overextending yourself, not pushing your own self over the edge, as well as people. But I grew up with feminine energies that were overbearing and pushed boundaries. And so it's taken recently with some of those relationships to say those boundaries because, or, set them clearly and communicate them, I was scared to do it because I don't even know why, because I was just scared to set that boundary, like they were going to hate me or they weren't going to like me or I was wrong for it. But once I did it, it set me free. It set me free to say, hey, this is this and this is why. No more. And I actually improved my relationships with people by doing that. Because then I was taking my self-respect back and saying, I'm number one here. And when we can prioritize our own energies first and do housekeeping here first and stand in our authority here first and respect ourselves first and take care of our energy first, we can go out and we can be so much more and help so much more. If we're not feeling self-respect towards ourselves, how do you expect to go out and have connections with people in the highest vibrational frequency? You're going to be in a lower vibe because you're not respecting yourself. And so you're going to put up with more and you're going to drain yourself more. And you're going to put up with more rascally business that is just taxing your energy. You got to cut it off. When you see that you've hit your limit or you're about to hit your limit, you say no. I've had to learn this with my child. Somewhere along the lines, me and my husband taught her that she could beg for something and we would say no, and then she'd beg, and then we'd waffle, give in, and then she'd say yes, and she gets what she wants. But now we consistently on some things have to say no and then not give it any more energy. It's like, that's the boundary. We said no. That's the end of it. It's like not going back into that energy, not opening up that wound, not feeding that energy more. If she was begging and we continued to say, oh, okay, that's going to keep reinforcing that begging, that boundary pushing, and she's going to continue to push it and know she can get what she wants. But by saying no, cutting that off, then she can work through whatever she has to and then move on, knowing that she's not going to get that. I know growing up, my grandma didn't have a whole lot of boundaries for my mother and her relationship. And she rolled over my dad's boundaries a lot. Like, my grandma was a beautiful woman, but she would come over and stay at our house and come help out, which was cool, but she'd stay for days, and my dad would come home from work and he'd be exhausted, and he, doesn't want to be dealing with somebody else every day besides his own family, and she was kind of a boundary pusher, so she was, pushing buttons and stuff, and he'd tell her to go home and she wouldn't listen, and my mom didn't back him up. And so his boundaries continually got rolled over because he wouldn't reinforce it. And so that overbearing, just like, I'm going to do what I want to do. I don't care about what you think or feel or what your boundaries are. That's basically what they're saying. I know a lot of people don't necessarily roll over people's boundaries intentionally to say, like, F you, I don't care about your feelings or your emotional needs. But energetically, that is like what they're saying. They're like, I don't care that you set this boundary. I don't care that this is not enough for you. I want what I want, so I'm going to steamroll right over your boundary and do what's important to me, because what I want is more important than your emotional needs, your physical needs, your whatever needs. And I think that's probably why a lot of feminine, females out there have weak boundaries, because we've been conditioned to just allow those boundaries to be steamrolled. And, a lot of violations, happen there. And so that happens strongly with the energy that comes towards us, We have to stand strong. Like, we have to say no and mean it and feel it. If you just say, oh, no, and kind of waffle into it, you're not really standing your ground. You're saying, I have a boundary, but I don't know if I'm going to necessarily hold to it. And then we end up feeling, the repercussions of that for ourselves. We lose our self-respect, and then we, have low self-esteem, and I don't understand why these relationships keep happening the way they do. We have repeat patterns of people not treating us well because we don't reinforce our boundaries. We don't hold our, stand strong in our authority with them. And then we don't understand why these patterns keep repeating, like, people dating, like, men are attracted to people that can stand strong in their own energy. I think in general, people are attracted to somebody who can hold their own and not just allow somebody to push them around. And it's funny, it reminds me of this little story I'll share. When I worked at Michael's Arts and Crafts back out of high school and probably into my early 20s. And I would always walk around there like I wouldn't put up with any shit. And I didn't necessarily notice that I was doing that. Like, I stood up straight, I looked forward, and I was just like always on a mission. And I had several people that I work with come up to me and say, like, after we started becoming friends, they'll be like, man, you know what? I was kind of scared at you at first. And I was like, why? They're like, because you walked around like you weren't going to take any shit. Don't mess with me. And little did I know that is a form of standing in my authority and being strong on, what I'm willing to deal with and put up with. And that was putting that vibe off, and people are picking up on it. And so I found through that, that I was like, okay, so these boundary things really do show up energetically, especially when we don't even know what's going on, just to help us understand how that energy can present itself. Let me see, is there anything else I want to share on this? If we don't allow our boundaries to be steamrolled, we feel good towards ourselves. We like where we're going with ourselves. We build up our confidence. We build up that self-love. We stand in our truth a little stronger. When I started putting up boundaries with a bunch of relationships that felt frustrating to me, just little things that I did to put the boundary down, and I saw how much more I felt good about it. And I was just like, oh, just a simple thing saying, hey, I'm going to communicate to you that can't handle this. I'm not going to deal with this. So this is how it is. Oh, my eyes look weird. Probably because I'm sick. And so everything changed for me and that person, And I started seeing them in a different light. I started seeing them as a divine being versus this frustration, like this person I had to put up with. Because now I'm like, oh, this is what I need and want, and this is what I'm going to get. And if I don't, I'm going to say it, and that's that. Person responds to it, and then action is taken, and then I've stood in my power and my energy and my boundaries, and the person doesn't steamroll me. Completely different. And I haven't spun my wheels. I haven't drained my energy. I feel good about myself because I took action for myself. I stood up for myself and said what I needed. I understood what I needed. I knew what I needed. I practiced showing what I needed. And so the whole dynamic just shifts. Just shifts into something different. So this is the part of the video where I would open up and offer you to put any comments that you have about boundaries. Like, where in your boundaries have you let people just steamroll right over you? Or where have you seen other people in your life get steamrolled by boundaries? Now, I shared with you that my grandma was a pretty strong boundary pusher. And she was pretty strong in the energy where she was just going to plow over your boundaries. She didn't care. But also, I saw people plow over her too. And that made me mad. So, you know, there's a give and a take there. And so you get to witness the patterns of it. So open up, share a comment about your boundaries and how holding your boundaries for yourself has made you feel better about yourself, or maybe it's improved a relationship. Maybe you are just now realizing that you are lacking in boundaries. That's cool too. I'm open to any questions if you have any comments about that. If you like the channel, go ahead and subscribe. If you like the video, like that. And if not, I'll see you on the next video. Wow. Thank you so much for showing up to receive the message. Love and laughter.